Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Kalen DeBoer, the Alabama Crimson Tide land a very intriguing commitment coming out of the transfer portal, and former Charlotte defensive back Kameron Howard. And I'll be the first one to admit this, 72 hours ago, not too familiar with Kameron Howard, was unranked coming out of high school. I don't watch a ton of Charlotte football. Had a buddy text me that he was getting some Power 5 buzz. You decide to look into Kameron Howard, what he brings to Alabama, and say, I would venture to say that Kalen DeBoer, Mo Linguist, maybe finding a little bit of a diamond in the rough in the transfer portal. Kameron Howard, exceptionally versatile. And then you turn on some of the film and say, really good instincts for a true freshman. You take a look at what he did for Charlotte last year, played over 400 snaps, started the last 2 games in 2023. Versatile, 129 in the box, 42 as a slot nickel corner, 167 as a free safety. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Malachi Moore, not only in terms of the body type, but the versatility that he brings to Alabama in the back end. I think we all knew that Alabama was probably a little short on numbers in that secondary. You inject a guy like Kameron Howard, who can play the free safety role, can play as a box safety, can play really as a nickel corner where he might be best at, and say, this helps you with the depth in the back end of this Alabama defense. Want to get into Kameron Howard and talk a little bit about what he brings to this Alabama defense. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It has been a blast covering the transfer portal the last couple of weeks. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas truly does mean a lot. One, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear how you guys are feeling about this one in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into Kameron Howard. And I think you first have to talk about the ability to play as early as he did as a true freshman. That is awfully exciting if you're an Alabama fan. You take a look at what you need to do to play early as a true freshman, regardless of the level of college football. You got to have physicality. You got to have instincts. Those are the first 2 things that jump out at you when you're talking about Kameron Howard. I think secondly, the versatility. And this is something that I think is becoming more and more important at the college football level, where you look at what opposing offenses are trying to do, spread you out, put a lot of speed on the football field. Having these versatile defensive backs who can hold up in man coverage, come and run support, play a box safety role, also play that free safety role. It gives you a lot of different abilities and capabilities to work against what opposing offenses are trying to do. And I think Kameron Howard largely represents a chess piece in this Alabama defense, where you can slot him in at a lot of different spots, and he can play a lot of quality football for you if you're an Alabama fan. I think more importantly, you get 3 more seasons of eligibility with Kameron Howard. I think that's probably not talked enough about in the era of the transfer portal, where, yeah, a lot of transfers come in to kind of provide that 1-year stopgap. You can also use the portal to get some building blocks for the next couple of years. Kameron Howard, again, has a redshirt year to use, but also a guy that has 3 more years of eligibility with this Alabama program. Want to get into a couple of different things that Kameron Howard kind of stands out to me. One, the instincts, the ability to go find the football as a free safety, playing Maryland week 2 of the season. I actually remember watching this game, believe it was on a weeknight, Thursday night, Friday night. Nice ball skills from Kameron Howard. 1, instincts. 2, the ability to go up, play the football. This is a guy that had 2 interceptions in the first 2 games at Charlotte last year. You like the ball skills as a free safety, but then you start talking about the versatility that Kameron Howard brings to the table as well. You take a look at him at the, at the bottom of your screen in the red zone, playing that nickel role, where he's going to be asked to play in man coverage. He's going to have to deal with a little bit of a pick route here. Really good short area quicks, really good ability to deal with physicality of what looks like kind of a bigger bodied slot wide receiver or tight end, staying in that hip pocket. Those are the stuff that you really covet if you're an Alabama fan, or really just a college football fan in general, in the back end of a defense. And you take a look at where he might slot into this Alabama secondary, and you start talking about what you're looking at. You've made some nice additions in the transfer portal, kind of headlined by a guy like Damani Jackson, who, if you can get the potential of a guy like Damani Jackson, this was a guy that was a top 10 national prospect 2 years ago coming out of high school, track background, big frame. Him coming out of high school, you looked at him and said, this can be a top 20 NFL draft pick if he puts it together. Obviously, did not put it together at USC his first 2 years. Change of scenery, coming across the country, putting on that Alabama uniform that tends to make people play a little bit better. Damani Jackson, in that question, if he can become an elite cornerback for Alabama, that goes a long way in kind of answering some of the question marks we have in this Alabama back end. You take a look at a couple of the younger cats, right? Xavier Mincy, Xavier Brown, a guy that probably plays a lot for Alabama as a true freshman. Jalen Mbakwe, a guy that is probably the most talented defensive back in this room, maybe behind Damani Jackson. And you start looking at this Alabama secondary, adding a chess piece in Kameron Howard, and say, we're starting to feel a little bit better about where Alabama is in that back end. We have very little questions about what that front seven is going to be. I think a lot of the questions are in that secondary for Alabama. I don't think Kalen DeBoer, Mo Linguist, will be done working the transfer portal to kind of solidify the depth and talent pool in that back end. But you have a guy like Malachi Moore coming back who's played just so much football throughout his career. You're starting to get a little bit more comfortable, really interested to see where Alabama goes in the transfer portal. One other thing I'd shout out, Mo Linguist is kind of cut his teeth on these kind of guys where he's worked at a lot of Power 5 programs and Group of 5 programs where you weren't necessarily recruiting at the level of Alabama. And so how did Mo Linguist make it happen at his previous stops? He had to kind of grind it out on the recruiting trail, find these type of prospects like Kameron Howard, who kind of flew under the radar. Really excited to see where Kameron Howard slots in this Alabama defense, and even more excited to see how he turns out for Alabama. A guy that I think certainly can contribute in 2024, but a guy that you're going to have for multiple years to continue to kind of fortify and build that secondary up. We'll cut it at that. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.